You are writing a story with your life, and it's interwoven with my story. Let's make it a real page turner. Sometimes we may laugh, and sometimes we may cry, but we can face whatever may come because we have faith for the journey, hope for the future, and love for those who are drawn onward with us through the story. I'm Teresa Janzen, and this is Drawn Onward. Okay, welcome to Drawn Onward. I'm Teresa Janzen, and I'm your host, and I have a super special guest for you today. This is actually my daughter, Caitlyn Vincent. And in honor of the holiday season, super family time, I thought I would have Caitlyn on here for an interview, especially because she has bought for me this fancy new microphone. So we're testing it out together with the Drawn Onward podcast. Welcome, Caitlyn.
Thank you.
Is this your very first podcast interview?
Yes, it most definitely is.
I thought so. It's also the first time I've interviewed one of my family members. So glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, one reason I thought it would be interesting to talk to you today, besides the fact that you gave me this fabulous microphone, thank you very much, is because you are a frontline medical worker in the midst of a pandemic. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I'm a medical assistant.
Awesome. And the other interesting thing about us as a mother-daughter is that I live on the other side of the world in East Africa, and you live here in the United States.
Yeah.
And you became a medical assistant and did your training and everything, all while I was really far away.
Yeah, that was pretty hard to do because it would have been nice because there was a lot of times when I was growing up, you helped me with school, studying, so it was different to be doing it on my own.
Yeah. Well, talking about like when you were growing up, Caitlyn, can you tell us kind of maybe where faith was first established in your life when you were growing up?
I think it was definitely when you were homeschooling me. I remember always talking about the fruits of the Spirit and just kind of going over what they were and what they meant and how they tied in with the body of Christ and everything. And I will admit I didn't really understand it until later, but it was definitely having those foundations when I was younger helped me establish them and understand them more as I grew older.
I remember in your little homeschool office, we had the fruits of the Spirit on the wall, and I think you had some craft projects around that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then after high school, you took a gap year. What did you do during that gap year?
I did a few different things, most of them all being mission work. First, I went to Mozambique with Calvary Church, and we went to Chinagane. I was doing Simply the Story, teaching.
Okay, wait. Not everyone knows what Simply the Story is. Tell us what that is.
So it's teaching the Bible to oral students. Also, if they can't read, then they can still learn it as well.
Yeah, so instead of reading the Bible to people, you're telling it to them like a story. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and then you talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, and then after Mozambique, what did you do?
I went to Romania and Carabia. There I did street ministry, so just talking to people and asking them where their faith laid, and then if they wouldn't mind us praying about them or hearing a little more about it, and then also inviting them to a local church. Then I went on to a ship with Logos Hope. That was a really fun experience. I was on there for, I believe, 6 months.
Yeah, I think it was 6 months. Yeah.
And it was going all across Latin America. I started in Panama. I ended in Chile. But it was a very good experience. And on there, there was a lot of different things that we did. There was sometimes that we would go out to churches and we would talk and raise money for other places or find out what that community needed. There was sometimes that we would do school and church building things. We also had an eye ministry where we would go and find people who had issues with their eyesight, and we would do pretty much what an optometrist would do and check their eyes and see if they needed glasses, and we had a lot of good donations for that. There's also a traveling book fair on board, and there was all types of books on there. There were Bibles, there were medical school books, there were books to help learn other languages or know more about other parts of the world. Just a vast variety of so many things.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing experience.
Yes, it was definitely
Yeah.
one I enjoyed.
Do you think you really grew up during that time, or was it after the ship, or where do you think you really like launched into, okay, I'm a grown up now? Or are you there yet?
I'm halfway there. I definitely think the ship helped. Being on the ship gave me a little more strength in my faith and my ability to do things. It was my first time really away from my family for so much. Like when I was in Romania and when I was in Mozambique, there were usually people older than me there, and they were kind of protective, like, "Oh, this is temporarily our daughter."
Uh-huh, you were
Yeah,
adopted.
but on the ship, it was a lot of people my age. There were other people who were older, and there was a lot of security there and new experiences with people all over the world, to the point where it was really eye opening to things that I had never had my eyes open to before. And then after leaving the ship, I will admit I was a little sad and kind of felt a little lost because there was a lot of structure on the ship. And I did continue some of that in my day to day life, but at the same time, if the ship helped me grow a lot, but if I stayed on the ship, I feel like I wouldn't have grown any further. So getting off the ship definitely moved me forward, but I am still definitely growing. So halfway into adulthood.
Uh-huh. Okay. So part of that growing process or launching into adulthood happens, you think, like when all those safety nets are gone and it's just you.
Yeah, definitely losing your safety nets that you had when you were younger and creating your own safety nets is definitely, I think, the biggest steps into adulthood.
Wow. And for you, that really kind of happened very abruptly after the ship, didn't it?
It did, yeah, because I mean, when I got home, you weren't here, and you have been one of my biggest safety nets. I I also didn't have the really strong spiritually uh, founded people that I had on the ship that if I was feeling any turmoil, I could go to and they would have all this wonderful wisdom to give me. Uh, and then I also, the only family I had where I moved to was like an hour away, and
Mm.
I don't have a car still. And so getting to them wasn't really an easy thing to do. So I kind of was on my own. I was lucky that the church that I go to, that you're part of, is close by still, and that there are people I know here, but still accessing them was a little bit of a challenge to the point where I still had to stand on my own 2 feet.
Yeah, it's not easy when, yeah, you might have a little bit of a support structure, but they're not really your family, and maybe you need to ask for help. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like asking your mom's friends for help almost, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice, but sometimes it's a little awkward because
Mm. Yeah, I could see where that could be awkward. So, what was it that helped you really get through some of those times, maybe that were hard in those early months, of really being on your own?
well, the first few months, I actually was not really doing anything to help myself at all. I
Mm,
did kind of lay in bed, watch a lot of TV shows, and I wasn't productive at all. But
mm,
I would say the biggest thing that kind of pushed me out of what honestly was a depression from not having that stability anymore, because I am someone who does enjoy stability quite a bit,
mm.
uh, was actually getting a job,
Okay.
which kind of financially realizing I can't do this forever. I can't
Oh,
live somewhere and just sleep and eat all day. I have to actually have finances, otherwise I won't have the security to on the weekends sleep
mm.
and eat.
Okay.
So I kind of got over myself a little bit and went walking downtown, and I found a job.
Wow, just like that.
Yeah, it was actually really odd for me. It took a little bit to first find it, but the job that I applied for, I've worked in food before, so I kind of figured I was going to get something in food, but I didn't expect to get the job right away because one, they were not hiring at the time, and two, the people who were kind of hiring at the moment were kind of hectic and they didn't really listen to me during the interview series. So I was like, oh, this isn't really going to happen.
I do know that you do really enjoy food because it really
Mhm.
gives something special to life. You've always been a foodie.
It's very true. Yeah, I love both making it and eating it.
And I remember one of the things that you and I did, an exercise we did, was you were trying to decide between two different careers.
Very different careers.
So tell us about that and how that worked for you.
uh, for a while, I was thinking about opening my own bakery, possibly as food truck form.
Okay.
And then the other option was medical, going into medical field. And they were very different paths, of
Very
course.
different paths.
Yeah. And
I do remember when you were thinking about those two options, I'm like, food service, the number one industry that new businesses fail far more than they succeed, or medical, one of the fastest growing careers in the world right now. And I'm
yeah,
thinking,
yeah. And all this
but it was a
decision,
tough choice for you.
it was. All these decisions happened before the pandemic started, so
Right, yeah.
we did like these card things that you would write on there, like the pros to this job and the cons to this job, and then like education time, financial strain, everything, and then also how much passion I had in it. And one of the biggest things with baking, why it's not really that good of an idea, is I have to be in the mood.
You can't just bake every day.
Yeah, because I'll get sick of it. Like I have to be in the
Mm.
mood, and then depending on my mood depends on what I want to make, and so it kind of made it a little more difficult to see that as a stable job.
You know what's really interesting is it was my mom who taught me how to do that. We called it a T chart, the pros and the cons. And you had two different things to choose from. So we really kind of made a kind of a fancy T chart weighing out all the
Yeah,
options, didn't we?
we did, yeah. And I'm really happy that I kind of changed my mind because I for a really long time I did go through a lot of different options. For a while I wanted to be a carpenter and I realized that's more of a hobby.
Yeah.
So,
I remember when you were doing that too. Yeah. So it's something that my mom taught me a skill set, and then it's kind of cool that I taught you. And
yeah.
maybe someday, you'll have someone you can teach.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. But you decided on,
So I decided on the medical field, starting out as a medical assistant.
okay, but you didn't just walk into a doctor's office and said, I want to work here.
I know it was a little bit of hunting because first I was thinking about nursing, and my original hope was to go to college and start that way. But nursing college is really expensive, and where I live, there's a 2-year waiting list.
Mm,
And so I figured, there's something I have to do in the meantime. And also where I live, it's also of an point system as to how far you move up the list.
mm.
And so starting now with something else medically would put me further on the list. So I was looking. So actually, you found it. It was the medical assistant program, and it was an accelerated program. So I would get it done soon enough that I could be working while also waiting on the list for nursing, and it would count for 30 credits towards the nursing program.
Right.
Yeah, which was really nice because I would save money and time and
And then in the middle of your education, we went into a global pandemic.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
actually in class when it happened. We were going over some, I think it was bandages, bandaging wounds, I think is what we were talking about.
Wow.
And as we were doing that, and our teacher got an email, and he was like, okay, so there's a pandemic going on. They're talking about shutting things down. It's unclear if we're going to be shut down. And then, like, maybe 15 minutes later, he said, okay, so they say that we're going to get shut down now, but it should only be for 2 weeks.
Okay.
It was not for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I remember that we chose this program because it was very hands-on, and you are a very hands-on learner.
I am.
Yeah, sitting through lectures is not your best way to learn.
No, it's not. My
Yeah.
mind starts to wander a little bit because it's like, okay, this person has repeated the same thing over and over again to get it into people's minds. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I've heard this. I don't need to listen anymore, which is not a healthy mentality to have in class.
Right.
But it's something I can't control.
So you, like a lot of other college students, went from classroom learning to online learning.
Yeah, that was really difficult because my teachers, none of them had taught online class before. And so they were trying to figure it out at the same time. And
Wow. So you're learning the system, your instructors are learning the system. The whole program wasn't really designed for this type of learning,
right.
everything all at once. Did you ever feel like a guinea pig?
I did, yeah, a little bit because they were like talking about how they were gonna do things, and they were like, okay, so this didn't work out, so we're gonna try it this way,
Mm,
and and
wow.
everything. So there was like a mix between some teachers who were doing videos that they were posting, and then some teachers who were doing strictly PowerPoints that you scrolled through by yourself,
Mm,
and then sometimes they would do like a mix of both, and
wow.
yeah,
And so I think the other challenge was you had kind of planned on your budget and everything, and that this program was going to take 22 weeks, and all of a sudden it's extended now by a lot, right? It was
yeah.
months delayed for graduation.
It was, and like a lot of the time we weren't doing school. At first, we weren't doing school at all because they were like, we're just going to be gone for 2 weeks. We're going to be gone for a month. And then we're going to come back and we're going to finish. And then, because there's some online things that couldn't be done, like certain tests that you needed to do hands on. So you were
Mm,
able to do them when you actually started working. Uh,
yeah,
so there were some things that we ended up doing in sections that we had to do still in person, fully masked, like phlebotomy. So that was something that was one of the group module kind of things that we did. That this is your time block. You're only with these four people in this room. You're going to be 6 feet away at all times. The teacher is going to be there because there's only 5 people allowed in a room. So it's
mm,
4 students, one teacher, and then we talk about it really quick, and then we do quickly the whatever procedure it was that we were practicing, phlebotomy or certain tests, and then after that they were like, okay, go home, don't stay in the parking lot, don't stay in the hallways, just go home.
wow, no pressure, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And all this time that all this global pandemic, your life is changing, the finances are getting stressed. Um, all these things are happening, and your mom is on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that was definitely really difficult
Yeah.
to deal with because there's so many things that I got really stressed about. Like one thing, my school changed, and then halfway through my school changing, I still had my job for a while, but then my job had to close down, and
You and I video chatted a lot during that
we
time.
did. Yeah, that was a nice thing from the pandemic of not being able to go anywhere. Is I was more able to video chat you really late at night, early morning for you, and
Hmm.
we could talk. And then, of course, once I started doing school again and work again and getting hired in at my job, it was kind of hard to do the video chats. And
It's true. I know for me, one of the things that I noticed is it's the middle of the pandemic, but because I live on the other side of the world, I've been distant from you kids. And
Mhm.
in the middle of the pandemic, though, everyone's at home, and now all of a sudden I can chat with people. So I almost felt more connected to some of you kids
Yeah.
than before the pandemic. And that's kind of a weird thing. And I think some people who've been distant from their family maybe have had that same experience. But other people who were living in a connected world before now were feeling disconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of different.
Yeah, I didn't feel too much of a change in my day to day life because pretty much my entire life, because I was working so hard towards the goal, it was just wake up, go to work, go to school, go home, finish homework, go to sleep.
Mm.
And I didn't really do too much for myself. I mean, I still had like moments where I'm just like, okay, my brain is completely shut off. I'm just gonna watch some nonsense show right now, or I'm just going to do a project that doesn't really take much mind power, like knitting something. And then I'll just do my homework on my lunch break tomorrow. So yeah, I didn't really have that much interaction. And
Mm.
then during the pandemic, I did. I was video chatting you, grandma, my cousin. It was like even my sisters I video chatted a little bit.
We are a scattered family, and somehow in the middle of the pandemic, we found a way to come together a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now, just to kind of wrap up with where you are, because you when I feel like I left the US and you were just this high school graduate finishing your gap year, and now you're a frontline worker.
I do have a job as a medical assistant. It's not like I'm working in a COVID ward or anything.
Right. Yeah.
I work just at a clinic. Uh, it is a nice clinic that I'm happy to be working at, but it's still nice to have job stability, and there is still some risk because I mean, just because someone has COVID doesn't mean that they all of a sudden don't have any other conditions.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they still need to be treated. And I mean, I don't really deal with that much, but there is still stuff there for precautions. Like we just got fit tested for N95 masks. There's all the proper PPE, so gloves, gown, eye goggles. So it's nice that we have those things. And
Now, do you feel, and now that you're working this type of a job, does that help you feel more like a grown up, or you still feel like you're,
I feel like a kid a lot, but I'm going through and I'm checking someone in for their visit, and I'm like, this is really weird. I just like not even 2 months ago, I wasn't taking someone's blood pressure for an actual appointment. It was just, this is
yeah,
my friend at school who I'm checking their blood pressure like 3 times in a row to make sure that I'm listening to the sounds, hearing them, and then also doing blood draws and just like, I actually have a license to draw someone's blood. That's weird.
yeah, wow, right.
And
So I know for a lot of parents, it's really unusual to watch their kids grow up. And so it's interesting that even for you, it's
yeah,
kind of weird, huh?
yeah, it's really weird. It's because it's also really different than anything I really expected in my life. I mean, yes, as a kid, I either wanted to be taking care of people or I wanted to be taking care of marine life in a medical kind of setting. But at the same time, just because you hope to do that doesn't mean it makes it any less weird to actually be there and actually doing something to
Right.
help find out what's wrong with them or just helping them feel like someone's listening to them.
Well, Caitlin, this has been so fun to chat with you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to share with anyone? Maybe other young adults that are in your position, a word of encouragement, or other parents maybe who feel far away from their kids right now?
Uh, the only thing I would have to say that maybe goes for everyone is it's very stressful right now. I know that was very stressful for me. And there was many times where I would get a low score on a test. Well, not many times a low score on a test, but I would get a low score on a test or I wouldn't do something right in the way that I thought I was going to. And I would get very upset at myself that I didn't do it the way I was supposed to. And it made me very stressed and overwhelmed. And then also having my mom, even though I know that she was trying to help me, sometimes feeling overwhelmed with her being like, okay, so what do we need to do next? It would make me
Hmm.
feel very overwhelmed. And just being able to relax and take a deep breath and realizing that just because you got less than on a test or just because you weren't always quick to an answer as someone else was does not mean that you're going to fail. It does not mean that you're not going to get to the finish line, even though it definitely feels like it.
Hmm.
Just take a deep breath, relax, even though it's very hard with how much weight is put on our shoulders right now, especially with video learning. Um, but just breathe and realize it will be over soon. And hopefully you'll be able to come through and do what you're really passionate about.
That's really great advice, actually, for everyone. Just take a deep breath, hang on. We can make it to the finish line,
Yeah,
whether it's fast or slow. Just keep
yeah.
keep moving forward.
Yeah, just keep moving forward. It's easier said than done, but it's definitely something that needs to be done.
Yeah, and although I do want to say I know you, Caitlin, and when you say I didn't do as well on the test as I wanted to, I remember you called me and you got like a I don't know, like a 93 or something. You're like, I can't believe it. I got a 93.
Yeah.
Devastating.
That is true. I am my worst. own worst enemy because I do set these really high goals for myself, and anything and in my mind, anything less than a 95 is devastating for myself. But if one of my friends was like, "Oh, I got an 85," I'd be like, "You can work with that. You can build on that."
Right.
But me, I'm very, very critical of myself.
We tend to give other people a whole lot more grace than we give ourselves, don't we?
It's very true.
Okay, so breathe and give yourself a little grace.
Yes.
All right. I think with that, we will end on that. And I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Thanks for listening. God bless you. DrawnOnwarD is more than an amazing palindrome. It's a production of TeresaJanzen.com.